The storm was merciless. The kind of storm that didn't just tear at a man's body but clawed at his sanity. Red sand whipped across the barren expanse of Jara-9, stinging like shards of glass against Captain Elias Vey's exposed skin. His oxygen mask hissed with every breath, and the heads-up display inside his visor flickered as interference from the storm scrambled his sensors. He trudged on anyway. He hadn't crossed 3 light years and risked his ship for nothing. The signal was still out there, weak, erratic, but steady enough to pull him deeper into this wasteland. His boots sank ankle-deep in shifting dunes, each step harder than the last. He had fought pirates in asteroid belts, escaped syndicate ambushes near black holes, even survived a reactor breach aboard a derelict freighter. Yet nothing felt as heavy as this endless march across a desert that wanted to bury him alive. Finally, his wrist scanner chirped. The signal's pulse grew stronger. His chest tightened with anticipation. He scanned the horizon, eyes straining against sheets of sand, until something caught the dull gleam of lightning overhead. Half buried in the shifting ground, a shape. He staggered forward, knees hitting the sand. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't debris. It was manufactured. Angular edges, blackened metal, the faint shimmer of glyphs crawling across the surface like living light. A crate. Not just any crate. This one looked older than the Alliance itself. Its plating was scarred, as if it had survived fire from 1,000 battles. Its seals hummed with faint energy, stubbornly intact after who knew how many centuries underground. Elias reached out, brushing away the sand, his glove coming to rest on the cold surface. That's when it happened. A whisper, not through his comms, not from outside. From inside his own skull. "Please." The voice was soft, trembling, undeniably human. "Please, don't open—" Elias froze. His hand jerked back as if the metal had burned him. His pulse hammered in his ears. He spun, rifle snapping into his grip, scanning the storm. Nothing, only the hiss of sand, the distant rumble of thunder. But the voice came again. "Don't let them free. Please!" He staggered backward, breath ragged, visor fogging with heat. He had heard stories, of course. Every spacer had. Relics of the old builders. Vaults left behind by civilizations that predated the Alliance by millennia. But those were myths whispered in bars at the edge of known space. He had never truly believed them, yet here it was. A black crate whispering in human tongue on a dead world. The storm grew louder, almost as if the planet itself wanted to swallow the discovery before it could be uncovered. Lightning slashed across the sky, throwing jagged shadows over the crate. Elias's scanner stuttered uselessly, unable to penetrate the shielding. Whatever was inside, it wanted to stay hidden. He tightened his grip on the rifle. Walk away? That was the smart call. Pretend he had never seen it. Let the desert bury its secrets again. But Elias had never been accused of being smart. That voice wasn't just a warning. It was a plea, and pleas did something to him. They reminded him of every distress call he'd ever answered, of every crew he'd dragged from burning hulls. He had always believed one thing: if you hear someone ask for help, you don't walk away. The crate shivered. Just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But enough. Something inside was alive, or at least conscious. Elias's stomach turned cold. He knew what this meant. If the signal had reached him, it had reached others. He wasn't alone on this hunt. Out there, beyond the storm, predators were already closing in. Pirates, mercs, scavengers, maybe worse. Entire fleets might descend on Jara-9 for this find, and he was standing here alone, one man with a rifle, staring at a box that could ignite a galactic war. He set his jaw. Leaving wasn't an option. Not for him. Not now. Elias dug his boots into the sand, powered up his exosuit servos, and wrapped his arms around the crate. It was heavier than it looked, like dragging a dying star through the dunes. Muscles burned. His back screamed. But slowly, painfully, he heaved it free from the grip of the desert. The voice whispered one last time, faint but urgent. "Don't open." "Please, don't open!" Lightning cracked overhead. The sky glowed red. And as Elias staggered toward his ship with the impossible burden, he couldn't shake the thought that whatever lived inside the crate had been buried for a reason. The crate sat on the deck of the Horizon's edge, gleaming faintly under the ship's interior lights. Elias paced around it like a man trapped in orbit around a black hole. The voice had gone quiet since he hauled it aboard, but the silence was worse than the whispering. It pressed down on him, heavy and watchful, as though something inside was waiting for his next move. The ship hummed with the low, steady thrum of her engines. He had barely finished sealing the hatch when his console flared crimson. Long-range sensors screamed a warning. Multiple contacts. Fast. Elias sprinted to the pilot's chair. His heart sank as the signatures sharpened on the display, jagged outlines, spiked hulls, and weapon arrays bristling with cruel intent. Varcoon. Not raiders, not scavengers. An entire war cruiser flanked by hunter craft, already closing the distance. "Damn it!" he hissed. He should have known the signal wasn't meant for him alone. The crate was bait for wolves, and the wolves had come running. The comms unit crackled. A guttural voice filled the bridge, vibrating with menace. "Human vessel, you will surrender the relic. Now. Do this, and your death may be merciful." Elias smirked, though his palms were slick with sweat. The Varcoon always made the same promise. Surrender and die slowly, resist and die fast. Either way, you ended up floating in pieces. "Yeah," he muttered, fingers flying across the console. "I've heard that one before." He tried hailing the Alliance patrol grid. Static answered. The storm interference, or worse, deliberate jamming. He was alone. The crate trembled. Just slightly. Then the voice returned, clearer than ever, threading into his mind like it belonged there. "You cannot fight them. Not like this. They will carve you apart, piece by piece. If you open me, you'll die. If you leave me, they'll kill you. Choose quickly." Elias clenched his jaw. Helpful advice. "Got anything else?" "Yes, don't trust them." "Don't trust anyone!" The comm crackled again, the Varcoon commander growing impatient. "Last chance, human. Jettison the crate, or we tear you open and rip it from your bones." Elias's ship shuddered as the first warning shots grazed his shields, sending sparks across the bridge. Red alarms flared. He was outgunned, outnumbered, and completely boxed in. But that wasn't new territory for him. He threw the throttle forward. The horizon's edge roared into motion, engines flaring white as he dove straight at the nearest fighter formation. Plasma fire streaked past the canopy, close enough to sear his vision with afterimages. His ship rattled, panels shaking loose, alarms wailing. He gritted his teeth, knuckles white on the controls. Turrets spun and spat. His cannons barked fire into the void. One Varcoon fighter disintegrated in a blossom of flame, debris scattering like deadly confetti. He juked left, rolled through incoming fire, and sent a missile screaming into another target, but the war cruiser loomed behind them all, massive and merciless, its main batteries charging with the power to slice his frigate in half. The voice pressed harder into his skull. "Elias Vey, you cannot run forever. You cannot win alone. Let me help you." "Release me?" "Not happening," he snapped, jerking the ship into a brutal climb. Sweat ran down his neck. His shields flared as another salvo clipped the hull. The deck jolted under his boots, and he nearly bit his tongue. He had seconds before the war cruiser locked him in. Seconds before his ship became a drifting husk. The crate pulsed with light, faint but insistent, like a heartbeat echoing through the deck. Elias cursed under his breath. He had carried contraband before, smuggled weapons, even ferried survivors of battles that weren't his to fight. But this was different. This was a choice between certain death and a mystery that could doom the galaxy. He fired off another volley, clipped 2 more fighters, then swung wide. The cruiser's cannons tracked him relentlessly, energy building in their cores like suns about to detonate. On his comm, the Varcoon commander snarled, "You fight like prey! When your wreck cools, we will find the crate. Nothing hides from us." The words ignited something in Elias. A stubborn fire that had carried him through every impossible battle of his life. He was a human. Prey didn't fight this hard. He cut the channel, eyes locked on the crate. His ship shook violently as another blast skimmed the hull, heat blooming across the consoles. The alarms howled louder. "All right," Elias muttered, voice low and grim. "You want me to choose? Fine. But if this kills me, I'm haunting you." He slammed his palm against the crate's seal. A hiss echoed through the cabin. Light burst outward, swallowing the bridge in radiance. The storm, the war cruiser, the alarms, all of it vanished into a moment of impossible silence. The light from the crate receded slowly, like dawn burning away the last scraps of night. Elias squinted through it, blinking hard, his hands still locked on the controls. The bridge was no longer empty. Something, or someone, stood there. At first he thought it was a hologram, a trick of the crate's power. But then the figure moved. A woman stepped into the glow, tall and poised, her body wrapped in silver threads that shimmered with a faint pulse, as if alive. Her hair spilled down her shoulders like strands of light itself, her eyes burning an unnatural blue that cut through the dim bridge like blades. Elias's throat went dry. His first instinct was to reach for the rifle strapped to his chair, but he couldn't move. Her presence pressed down on him, not threatening, but absolute. Like gravity itself had bent to her. Outside the canopy, the battle hadn't paused. Varkun fighters tore through the void, their cannons spraying fire. The war cruiser's main guns glowed, energy spiraling into a single catastrophic blast. Elias had seconds before the horizon's edge was reduced to vapor. He slammed the controls, trying to break the lock. The ship lurched, but the cruiser tracked him mercilessly. He was dead, and he knew it. Then the woman raised her hand. The war cruiser fired. A torrent of energy the size of a city roared toward them. Elias's breath caught. He could almost feel the heat. Could almost see the moment of his death. But it never came. The blast shattered mid-flight, broken apart as though invisible fingers had reached into its core and twisted. Shards of light scattered harmlessly into the void. Elias's mouth went dry. "What the hell?" The woman turned her gaze on him. Her voice, no longer the fragile whisper from the crate, was a resonance that thrummed in his bones. "I am Seraphine, the last war singer. You opened my prison. Now we break them together." Another squadron dove toward the horizon's edge. Elias yanked the ship hard to starboard, cannons spitting fire. One fighter went up in a plume of metal and flame, but 3 more closed the gap. Seraphine didn't move her lips. Instead, a sound, felt more than heard, rose around them. The bridge vibrated, panels rattling, as if the song existed inside the ship itself. The void outside rippled. The fighters' missiles twisted mid-flight, veering off course. They turned back, slamming into their own carriers with brutal precision. The squadron erupted in fire, debris spinning out into the endless dark. Elias's eyes widened. His scanners went berserk, trying to interpret what had just happened. To the instruments, it was impossible. Trajectories bending where no force should exist. Yet Seraphine stood at the center of it, calm, unshaken, her blue eyes fixed on the battle like a conductor guiding an orchestra. "Keep flying," she said, her voice cutting through the alarms. "I will shape the fight. You deliver the killing blows," Elias snapped out of his daze. "Right, fine, let's see what you've got." He slammed the throttle forward. The horizon's edge darted through the wreckage, weaving between broken fighters, closing on the cruiser's exposed flank. Varkun gunners poured fire at him, but every salvo bent, curved, or detonated early. Seraphine's unseen hand twisted the battlefield itself, stripping the enemy of their certainty. Elias lined up his shot, teeth gritted. "Let's make it count." His torpedoes screamed free, streaking across the void. At the last moment, Seraphine's voice surged again, a crescendo that shook the bridge. The torpedoes accelerated unnaturally, as though the void itself carried them. They tore through the cruiser's failing shields and punched straight into its reactor core. The detonation was blinding. The war cruiser split in two, flames erupting from within as its superstructure collapsed. Shards of molten metal scattered like meteors, lighting up the darkness. The shockwave slammed the horizon's edge, rattling the hull but leaving her intact. Silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems and Elias's ragged breathing. He turned, staring at Seraphine. Her glow had dimmed slightly, her expression weary but unbroken. She had destroyed an entire fleet without firing a weapon, without lifting a blade. Elias tried to speak, but the words stuck. He'd faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This wasn't just survival. This was war rewritten. Finally, he managed, What are you?" Her gaze locked on his, piercing and ancient. "A war singer." a living weapon forged to end empires. I refused. They buried me for it. But now, she looked out at the burning wreckage drifting across the void. Her voice softened. Now they will know I have returned. And they will come. The bridge still glowed faintly from Seraphine's presence, as though the walls themselves remembered her song. Elias's pulse hammered, his fingers tight on the controls, but his eyes kept flicking back to her. She stood perfectly still, yet the air around her shimmered with something he couldn't name. Power older than the stars. Outside, the wreckage of the cruiser drifted like a shattered continent. The battle wasn't over. Dozens of fighters still circled, regrouping. They weren't retreating. They were waiting. And then Elias understood. The Varkun had sacrificed the cruiser just to test her. Now they would bring everything. The first wave struck. Sleek black ships cut through the void in a coordinated strike, spitting plasma fire from every angle. Elias's shields flared under the barrage, the deck quaking beneath his boots. Seraphine stepped closer, her eyes glowing brighter. "Trust me," she said simply. Her voice rose, not loud but resonant, a hum that seemed to come from the bones of the ship itself. Elias's console flickered, as if caught in a surge, his sensors unable to map what was happening. Then the enemy fire bent mid-flight, curving harmlessly away from the horizon's edge. The fighters wavered, confused, but Seraphine lifted her hand, fingers spread. Invisible force rippled outward. 3 ships veered into each other, colliding in a storm of shrapnel. Another's engines burned out instantly, sending it spinning into the darkness. Elias didn't waste the opening. He dove into the chaos, cannons barking. His fire found targets with uncanny precision, as though her unseen hand guided every shot. A fighter exploded directly ahead, debris scattering wide as he threaded the needle between burning fragments. "She's bending the battlefield," he muttered, half to himself. But the Varkun weren't fools. More ships dropped from hyperspace, black spears piercing the void. Elias cursed under his breath. This wasn't just an ambush anymore. It was a hunt. Seraphine's glow dimmed slightly, her movement slowing. Sweat glistened on her brow. She turned her head toward him, her voice quieter but still firm. "They will not stop. Not until I am theirs again or destroyed. You must move faster." Elias pushed the throttle until the engines screamed in protest. The horizon's edge spun through the enemy formation, dodging a wall of fire by a breath. He fired another torpedo spread, tearing a cruiser apart. The shockwave rippled across his shields, rattling the hull. Seraphine's song shifted pitch, lower now, heavier. The void itself seemed to bow under it. Elias's stomach churned as gravity twisted unnaturally. Entire enemy squadrons folded inward, crushed together as if the stars themselves clenched a fist around them. The resulting explosion lit the void brighter than any sun, but Elias saw her knees buckle. Her hands trembled. That power came at a cost. He steadied the ship with one hand and reached out with the other, catching her before she fell. "Hey, stay with me." Her gaze lifted to his, fierce despite her exhaustion. "I am not broken yet. But every note burns me." A shadow fell across them both. A massive silhouette blocked out the stars. A second Varkun cruiser, larger than the last, dropping from hyperspace with a thunderous boom. Its weapons glowed, charging for a strike that could erase them in a single shot. Elias's gut turned cold. One frigate against that? Impossible. Even with her. Seraphine pushed herself upright, her blue eyes blazing with renewed intensity. "Then impossible is what we do." Her voice climbed once more, shaking the ship, rattling his very chest. Energy swirled around her, brighter and sharper than before. The cruiser fired. A colossal beam lanced across space, yet it fractured mid-flight, split apart as though ripped by unseen claws. Elias didn't hesitate. He cut across the cruiser's flank, cannons blazing, torpedoes streaking like burning comets. Guided by Seraphine's song, they pierced deep into the warship's core. A moment later, the cruiser split apart in a chain of catastrophic explosions, fragments scattering like the death cry of a dying god. The battlefield fell silent. Every surviving fighter disengaged at once, scattering into the dark. They hadn't retreated, they had reported. This was no victory. It was a declaration. Elias sat back, sweat soaking his collar, his lungs burning with every breath. His ship was scarred, his shields crippled, but they were alive. Against all odds, alive. He turned to Seraphine. She leaned against the console, her glow dimmed, but her gaze was sharp as ever. This is only the beginning. The others will come. Whole fleets, perhaps entire empires. They will not rest. Elias studied her, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. And what do we do when the whole galaxy shows up at my doorstep? Her answer was simple. We fight together. News traveled faster than any ship. Within days, every comm channel, every black market whisper, every coded alliance briefing carried the same impossible story. A lone human frigate had destroyed not one, but 2 Varkun cruisers. And not with alliance fleets or cutting-edge tech, but with something no one could explain. Elias Vey became a name on every bounty board in the galaxy. And Seraphine, the figure of light who walked out of that crate, was no longer a secret. She was a prize. The horizon's edge leapt from system to system, hunted every step of the way. Syndicate mercenaries tried to intercept them at the edges of gas giants. Alliance patrols, supposedly allies, attempted to force docking under the pretense of investigation. Pirate lords offered obscene sums for Seraphine, bragging they would chain her voice to fuel their empires. And the Varkun, they did not offer. They simply swore to burn every world she touched. On the 4th night since the battle, Elias found Seraphine in the observation bay, standing alone against the stars. She looked less like a weapon and more like a woman carrying the weight of entire civilizations. Her glow had dimmed, but her presence still filled the room, as if gravity itself bent toward her. He leaned against the frame, tired lines cut deep into his face. You've stirred up a storm the likes of which I've never seen. I need to know. Why help me at all? She didn't look at him at first. Her voice was quiet, tinged with an exhaustion he'd never heard before. Because you are human. You do not kneel. Every empire I have seen rises, grows arrogant, and then collapses into fear. But your kind, you are reckless, untamed. You reach for the stars even when they burn you. That is why I chose you. Her words hung between them, heavy as stone. Elias had no answer. Humanity wasn't a shining example of unity. They were fractured, still young compared to the old races. But maybe that was the point. They hadn't been broken yet. Before he could reply, alarms howled across the ship. Elias sprinted back to the bridge, Seraphine at his side. The nav console painted the void red with incoming signatures. Not one cruiser. Not even a dozen fighters. 3 Varkun dreadnoughts, each the size of floating cities, had dropped from hyperspace with mercenary escorts swarming like hornets. Enough firepower to gut an entire star system, Elias swore under his breath. He'd seen planetary sieges with less muscle. This wasn't a pursuit anymore, it was extermination. The comms channel crackled alive. A deep, guttural voice filled the bridge. Human, relinquish the singer. There is no escape. Surrender, and your death will be swift. Elias cut the feed with a jab of his finger. His jaw clenched as he locked eyes with Seraphine. So run? Her gaze was steady, unflinching. No, stand. If we flee, they will hunt forever. If we break them here, the galaxy will see what cannot be denied. The dreadnought spread into formation, weapons igniting. Fighters swarmed ahead, a tide of metal and fire. Elias shoved the throttle forward. His frigate hurtled into the chaos, tiny against the colossi arrayed against it. He should have been afraid. He should have felt hopeless. Instead, adrenaline burned through him like a second engine. All right, Seraphine, he muttered, hands flying across controls. Let's show them what impossible looks like. The first wave slammed into them. Fire lit the void in every direction. Shields screamed under the onslaught. Heat warnings blared across the panels. Elias wove the horizon's edge through the storm, ducking between blasts. Skimming so close to enemy hulls he could almost feel their gravity wells drag at his ship. Seraphine stood at the center of the bridge, her voice rising once more, that unearthly melody shaking the hull. The battlefield twisted. Enemy formations shattered as if their own maneuvers betrayed them. Missiles curved back, detonating inside their carriers. Fighters spiraled into each other, fireballs blooming in clusters. But the dreadnoughts kept coming. Their weapons burned brighter, charging for the strike that would end him. Elias's knuckles went white on the controls. He caught Seraphine's gaze. She was pale, trembling, the cost of every note visible in the tight lines of her face. Yet her eyes still burned like stars. "You sure you can do this?" he asked. Her answer was simple, resolute. Together, the dreadnoughts unleashed their fury, and Elias Vey plunged headlong into the storm. The void erupted into chaos. 3 Varkan dreadnoughts fired as one, beams of annihilation carving across space like the wrath of gods. The horizon's edge dove through the barrage, its hull groaning under the strain, armor plates tearing loose into the storm. Elias Vey wrestled the controls like a man riding a dying beast. His hands shook, sweat burning his eyes, but he didn't dare blink. One mistake meant obliteration. Around him, warning sirens screamed. Systems bled out, engines overheating, shields failing, reactor nearing collapse. "Not enough," he spat, voice hoarse. "We're just gnats against giants." Seraphine moved to his side, steady though she trembled as if each second drained years from her. Her voice shimmered like crystal on the edge of shattering. "Then we will make giants fall." She placed her hand over the console. The lights dimmed. Elias felt something move through the ship, not power, not electricity, but a resonance, as if the frigate itself had become an instrument. The Varkun fighters swarmed closer. Seraphine sang. It wasn't a song of beauty anymore. It was a blade of sound. The first wave of interceptors disintegrated mid-flight, their hulls vibrating apart into showers of molten shards. The second wave faltered, their pilots writhing inside their cockpits as the resonance tore at their very nervous systems. Dozens of enemy ships simply dropped dead from the sky. The dreadnoughts reacted instantly, charging full broadsides. Elias slammed the frigate into a dive, skimming so close to the surface of one dreadnought that its massive cannons towered like skyscrapers above them. He launched torpedoes point blank, punching holes through armor that should have been impenetrable. Explosions rippled across its flank. One dreadnought lurched, engines sputtering. Elias grinned savagely. That's one, but the cost was brutal. The horizon's edge was breaking. The hull warped from stress, oxygen leaking into space, sparks raining from cracked conduits. Seraphine stumbled, her glow flickering. Blood, if it was blood, streaked from her nose, glimmering like liquid light. Elias caught her before she collapsed. "Stop! You'll kill yourself!" Her eyes locked on his, fierce and unyielding. "If I stop, you die. If I stop, humanity dies. The galaxy falls back into chains." The dreadnoughts closed ranks. They poured fire into the frigate, hammering it with barrages that would have leveled continents. The bridge shook violently. Elias was thrown against the controls, ribs cracking. His vision blurred, but he clung to consciousness with raw fury. "Seraphine!" he gasped. "Tell me what to do," she whispered, voice thin as a dying flame. "Let me burn," he froze. "No, there's another way, there has to be," but he saw it in her eyes. She was more than a weapon. She was a prisoner who had been caged because her very existence terrified empires. And now she had chosen not to be caged again. The dreadnoughts charged their final strike. A trio of beams, enough energy to erase a planet, aligned on the crippled horizon's edge. Elias roared, slammed the engines to maximum, and hurled the frigate directly at the lead dreadnought. "If we're going out, we're taking one with us." Seraphine rose to her full height, light blazing once more. Her voice cut across the void, not in words, but in pure resonance. Every shard of her being poured into one final note. The frigate shattered around them, its systems burning out, its hull peeling like paper. But that last note spread outward, unstoppable. The lead dreadnought convulsed. Its armor split along invisible seams, every rivet screaming apart. Its reactors ignited in a chain reaction that ripped the ship open from within. A second later, the shockwave consumed the escorts around it. The other 2 dreadnoughts faltered, their crews screaming as their systems buckled under the resonance tearing through metal and bone alike. And then, silence. Elias drifted in a ruined cockpit, half his body pinned by twisted steel. Through shattered glass, he saw the wreckage of titans burning against the stars. Humanity had stood against giants and won, but Seraphine was gone. Only a faint shimmer of light lingered where she had stood, fading like a dying star. He reached toward it, chest breaking with something deeper than pain. "You deserved more than this," he whispered. The shimmer pulsed once, as if in answer. Then it was gone. Rescue came days later. Human patrol ships picked up the wreckage, their crews staring wide-eyed at the battlefield littered with the corpses of dreadnoughts. Elias Vey was carried from the ruins, broken but alive. He became a legend. Not for surviving, not even for the destruction of the dreadnoughts, but for what Seraphine had chosen. The story spread, that a human and a prisoner of the old wars had stood together and broken the chains of fear, and across the galaxy, oppressed worlds whispered her name like a prayer. Not as a weapon, not as a curse, but as hope. Elias never stopped hearing her voice in the quiet. Not a command, not a plea, just that last promise. Together. And humanity, reckless and unbroken, carried it forward into the stars.